Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your attention. Thanks for coming to our really exciting launch event for our institute. It's been a long time in the planning, and it's great to have everyone here today to celebrate what we hope is going to be a really productive and impactful venture here at the University of Guelph. My name's Jim Petrik. I'm faculty in biomedical sciences and co-director with Dr. Michelle Oblak of the institute that we're hoping to inspire you and educate you on today. And we have a fantastic array of speakers that are going to showcase their areas of research and how the translational initiatives of the institute may really help catalyze some of their research direction and really bring forth an opportunity to bring a novel perspective into how we develop therapies, and hopefully we'll be able to develop therapies that have a really significant impact in the lives of Canadians and across the globe. Before we start today's event, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Guelph resides on the ancestral lands of the Attawandaron people and the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize the significance of the District 1 Spoon Covenant to this land and offer our respect to the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee and Métis neighbors as we strive to strengthen our relationships with them. Today, this gathering places home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and we acknowledge them, and it reminds us of our important connection to this land where we learn and work. So thank you to all of our First Nations peoples. And without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, which is Dr. Shayan Sharif, who's Associate Dean of Research here at OVC and has been part of the founding members and the organizing body of the Institute. So it's my pleasure to invite Shayan to come up and give some introductory remarks to the Institute. So Shayan.
Thanks very much, Jim, for the kind introduction. And I think, he really set the tone really well. So I don't really have a whole lot of things to say, but I do actually have almost, 10, 15 minutes. And I did mention to Jim that if you see me going overtime, just push me, kick me, do whatever you can, just to make sure that I don't go overtime, which probably I will. So it is with my great pleasure to be here today. And I'm absolutely delighted to see that the tree that we planted almost 3 years ago or so, it's really blossoming and is coming to fruition. This was definitely a privilege for me to work with Jim Petrik, Michelle Oblak, who's sitting there, Dr. Lauren Grant from Population Medicine. I don't see Dr. Grant here, but I'm sure that she's on her way because she has a presentation to make, and also more recently with Dr. Carrie-Ann McGregor, our college research manager. This work has definitely been a labor of love for all of us because we all came to appreciate that every day over 200 Canadians die of cancer. And almost the same number of Canadians die of cardiovascular disease in Canada. And I don't think that there is even one family here among us that hasn't been touched by a chronic disease, be it cancer, be it cardiovascular disease, be it a neurodegenerative disease. And some of us, I guess, are fortunate enough to have only been touched once or twice, but some of us have been touched by many of these chronic diseases many, many, many times. So it is indeed, a labor of love for most of us, to focus on some of these diseases and be able to find some treatment for them. We've obviously made a lot of progress over the last several decades in terms of survival rate of cancer and many of the other diseases, cardiovascular disease among those. But there is a lot more work to do. But on top of that, and unfortunately for us in veterinary medicine, finding treatments for diseases of our companion animals has also been hindered because of a wide variety of different reasons, one of which is actually the fact that we don't really have a very good flow of treatments from one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum. And as part of our Translational Health Research Initiative, we felt that we could accelerate the process of identification and testing for efficacy and testing of those treatments. Well, if you felt that this was my introductory remarks, you're partly correct, but I do actually have a few slides that I wanted to show you. And let me see if I can move forward. Yeah, here we go. So based on that background, why do we need to have a translational approach? Number of reasons. And this was actually my main motivation when Dr. Michelle Oblak and Jim Petrik came to me and they said, we've got to do something about translational health research. And I said, why do we need to do that? Because for most of you who know me, I'm a chicken researcher. I know nothing about translational research, but I can tell you I'm not a converted person. They said a few things. Diseases are complex and they mostly occur naturally. When you look at the rodent models of disease, of cancer, cardiovascular, etc., most of the time we basically have to induce disease in those rodent models. I'm not trying to dispute the importance of using rodent models, mice, rats, etc., but the reality is that they're not necessarily a naturally occurring model. Whereas in companion animals and also in large animals, I know that Betsy, you're going to say, what about large animals? What about dairy cows? The reality is that many of the diseases that happen in humans also happen in our companion animals and to some extent in large animals, and they occur naturally. The other important aspect here is that most of those diseases have similarities in terms of genomics and genetics of susceptibility or resistance to disease. There is a lot of similarity between diseases that happen in humans and diseases that happen in companion animals. The other important thing is that many of the diagnostic and monitoring technologies that we utilize for human disease can also be utilized in companion animals. So that would make companion animals perhaps a better model. So we don't necessarily have to devise new strategies and new instruments for detection and monitoring of diseases in rats and mice. And also the other important aspect is that there are a lot of physiological similarities between dogs and humans, which would make them an ideal model for human diseases. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, here we are talking about a bidirectional flow of information and treatment from animals to humans and also from humans to animals. And what we would like to do as part of our Translational Institute is to facilitate that process. And this has been indeed our vision. We want to accelerate discovery, innovation, and applied research afforded by expanding the range of animal models and also generating collaboration between veterinary and human clinicians across the various different research sectors. And we are in the best place possible in order to do that because we have the infrastructure, we have the clinical support, and we have strategic partnership with industry and academic stakeholders. So in a sense, we are in the best possible position to facilitate that process. I'm going to talk about University of Guelph as a hub, just in one slide, but then I'm going to focus on OVC because of my own domain that is in OVC. So why University of Guelph? I'm just using the analogy that Dr. Malcolm Campbell, who's actually sitting right here, our Vice President of Research, always uses. We don't have a medical school here on campus. We actually have two, perhaps three medical schools, because if you drive in each direction, in approximately an hour and a half, you're going to hit one of the biggest medical schools in Canada. You're going to hit University of Toronto within 45 minutes. You're going to hit University of Western Ontario in about an hour and a half, and you're going to hit McMaster University in about 45 minutes. So we do actually have a lot of medical schools, not necessarily on our campus, but within a stone's throw of University of Guelph. But on top of that, University of Guelph has this magnificent, I would say, areas of research on translational health research. Cardiovascular disease, we did a bit of a head count of how many people are doing cardiovascular disease, and I think, around 10 people currently in Guelph are engaged in cardiovascular disease. We might have missed a few. Neuroscience and neurology, this has been indeed one of the major areas of expansion at the University of Guelph. We currently have close to 30 neuroscientists in addition to neurologists. And I see Dr. Fiona James right back there sitting in the back. Regenerative medicine is also another up-and-coming areas within the University of Guelph, and we have close to 15 individuals, 15 researchers, along with their teams who are focusing on regenerative medicine. And cancer and oncology has indeed been one of the major areas of expansion in OVC over the last couple of decades or so. I would say probably since 2005-ish. This has been one of the major areas, both in terms of cancer biology, cancer science, and also oncology. So we do have a lot of talent and brain power behind our translational research, which in addition to the fact that we are very close to 3 major medical schools, would make Guelph one of the best hubs possible in Canada in order to promote translational research. What exactly do we do in OVC? This is basically just a snapshot of OVC, and I apologize for some of you who are not from OVC, but since my main domain is OVC, I just wanted to put my focus and emphasis on OVC. So the reality is that OVC is #1 in Canada. If you look at most of those rankings are done based on research. So when you think about research at OVC, we are, I would say, obviously based on those rankings, #1 in Canada and #3 in North America. And we do actually have data to back that up. We are ranked 6th globally. And again, that's primarily related to the impact of the research that we do, quantity, quality, and impact of research we do. One Health, and if you want to expand the definition of One Health, translational research would also fit into One Health. The health of animals, their environment that they live in, and the environment that humans live with their animals, and the interface among the three. As I mentioned before, we are very close to those medical schools, and we are living in an area that has 10 million people, give or take. So our catchment area is quite vast, and we are dealing with families that are, I would say, more or less affluent. So when you think about, the fact that you're dealing with 10 million people, approximately 6 million pets, and in terms of income of the families, you're looking at rather affluent families, that would make a very good environment for the sort of research that we want to do in our hospital, using animal models for humans, and also using treatments that come from human medicine into animal medicine. In OVC, we have the pleasure and privilege of having over 120 faculty members. We have 400 graduate students. We just recently did a head-to-head comparison between the number of graduate students here in OVC versus many other veterinary colleges across North America. We are by far having more graduate students compared to many other veterinary colleges. So we are quite competitive in terms of number of our students, in terms of number of our faculty. We also have 480 DVM students, which again, is quite high. It's very much comparable to many of the top veterinary colleges across North America and globally. We also bring in approximately $15 million worth of grant money into OVC each and every year. And we are also very privileged and fortunate to have Pet Trust, and Pet Trust is providing approximately $600,000 worth of funding for equipment and for research. And we, at the college level, we provide approximately $3.5 million for funding of our students in the form of student support for DVM, for DVSC, our residents, for MSc and PhD students. So that's basically OVC in a bit of a snapshot. I don't see Mr. Scott Woodrow here, but at the time he was the founder of Animal Health Partners, and Animal Health Partners provided funding for a research chair that was awarded to Dr. Michelle O'Black for veterinary medical innovation. And that really facilitated the whole process for us to be able to even initiate the Translational Health Research Institute. Without that help, this would not have been feasible. But in addition to that, OVC has a lot of assets, and some of those assets I've highlighted here. We have the Animal Cancer Center. We have a very lively and very active group focusing on clinical trials. We also have a biobanking group that is quite active, and probably I would say one of the unique features of OVC is the fact that we have access to significant number of cases that we've been able to sample over the last few years or so. And I know that Dr. Jeff Wood, who's sitting right there, is going to be talking about some of our cancer initiatives, which also include biobanking. And obviously we have one of the biggest and one of the best specialized hospitals in form of our companion animal hospital. We have approximately 12,000 patients a year, and we just recently went through a massive amount of renovation for our surgery, for anesthesia, and also for our ICU, to the tune of $9 million. I believe it's actually even more than $9 million. More. Ilya is telling me more. So, and last but not least, we also have access to the Comparative Clinical Research Facility, or the CCRF. Some of you might have seen it. If you haven't, I'm sure that you will in the future, because we do really want to get organized and start doing some clinical trials. within the comparative clinical research facility. This facility was built approximately 20 years ago or so in early 2000, early to mid 2000. It was a $6 million project at the time. Probably it's much higher now if you were to build it again. And we have a lot of different facilities within this facility, including an induction room, a recovery room, procedure room, surgery room, radiology room, and we have lots of labs and offices, which would make this facility absolutely fantastic for doing translational research. So overall, I think OVC is very much self-contained in many respects for translational research, but we do actually collaborate with many of our colleagues across the University of Guelph and also across Canada. Perhaps, some of our colleagues from across Canada are participating online. And I just wanted to say that the Translational Health Research Institute is going to be the main forum for facilitating the process for collaboration, focusing on testing, safety, efficacy, and potency of drugs, and perhaps registration of drugs as we go along. That could be used both for animal health and also for human health. So that's all I have to say, Jim. And you didn't need to kick me out of the podium.
Great, thanks so much, Shayan. That is absolutely a record for introductory remarks. That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Shayan. That was a great job encapsulating, I think, what our ultimate goal is and the reason why we're here today. And once again, it's so great to see everyone today. So our next speaker, I'd like to introduce a person that's going to provide some introductory remarks. We're very fortunate to have Honourable MP Llyod Longfield to join with us today. So MP Longfield is a Member of Parliament for Guelph, and also recently was named as the chair on the Standing Committee on Science and Research in the federal government, which I think very obviously is appropriate and very timely appointments. And just on a personal note, MP Longfield has been a longtime supporter of the research initiatives that have been going on here. Our lab has, for the last 5 years, has developed an ovarian cancer walk as a fundraiser for the research that we're doing and for Ovarian Cancer Canada. And MP Longfield has come out every single year to support our event and show his support for the initiatives that are going on. So we're grateful for that, and we're very grateful that he's here today to provide some introductory remarks. So I'll turn it over to you, Llyod. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim, and it's great to be joining virtually. I wish, of course, that I was there in person, but I'm joining from Ottawa. Quite a smoky day in Ottawa today. It's a day where we are going back to wearing masks, and it just shows that climate change is real and that we do need to continue to do research around lung health and also around climate health, which is all part of One Health, which I know that the University of Guelph is working on. As the new chair of the Standing Committee for Science and Research, of course, the richness of the University of Guelph and the research going on there is contributing to our national dialogue. The studies that we're engaged with always overlap with work that's going on at the University of Guelph in some way or another. And the translational research that you're doing as well of looking at how do we take the learnings from animal health and translate that into human health. And you, Shayan mentioned at the beginning about some of the family connections. And personally, my wife is struggling with a degenerative neurological disease and has been working with Dr. Phillips and also Dr. Scott Ryan. We've visited his lab around Parkinson's. And the Parkinson's support group in Guelph regularly interacts with the University of Guelph, whether it's on extreme exercise testing or other aspects of trying to combat the symptoms of that degenerative neurological disease, which has no cure. And at this point, we rely on research and fundamental research to being leading us towards a place where Canadians will be able to have better results from that disease. Also, as you mentioned, the ovarian cancer, or whether it's kidney cancer, or the work that's been going on around the impact of COVID, the research that we're funding through the Government of Canada, through the granting agencies, is also something that we're always looking for the opportunities, and opportunities for early stage researchers, and making sure that the early stage researchers are covered in terms of their cost of living, and something that we're currently looking at and discussing at the Science Committee. The Science Committee will be meeting in a few minutes, and in fact, in a few minutes, I'm also going to be tabling a report on moonshot science. So what types of science are we developing that's the equivalent of a moonshot science that is out there, that we have to be looking at the long-term effects of science and data, and how do we take those opportunities forward for building a better country. As I also look at our witness this morning is Dr. Mona Nemer, the Chief Science Officer for Canada, and I'm looking forward to the discussion we're going to have with her around the independence of science and outside of the political realm, and how we need to be working across party, but also outside of government, to make sure that the right bridges are being made. And I see that happening at the Translational Center with the different businesses that are involved, whether it's large business or even small local businesses that are involved with facilitating testing or trials or funding the science that we're working on together. It's health is something that is certainly has been a focus going through COVID. It's a focus today as I look out the window at the haze over the Supreme Court of Canada, which is just across the street from me. And as we look at things like the international effects of food security or insecurity, the global geopolitical positioning around some of the issues that other countries are facing in science, and what Canada can do to contribute to the global knowledge base that we have on translational science. So you've got a room full of people that are very steeply engaged in this topic, and thank you to the University of Guelph for bringing that conversation together today. I wish I could be more involved with the conversation, but as I said, I've got to flip over to some parliamentary duties, but you'll be pleased to know that at least they're focused on science, and I will continue that focus. I look forward to being back in Guelph this summer and possibly visiting the labs. I know that we've had some new research chairs appointed, and also some progress in the labs. And so if there are scientists in the room that would like a conversation, please do reach out to my office, and we'll see whether we can arrange my getting onto campus over the summertime. And that also helps me to inform myself as we go forward into the fall studies that we'll be doing. I also sit on the Environment Committee for Canada, and we've just done a study on the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. It's just passed the House. It's in the Senate right now for ratification. And the discussion we had around toxic chemicals being used in animal testing, and what do we have in terms of alternatives. And I know that the University of Guelph is also working on that with other universities, so that we can do more humane testing of research as we go forward. So again, thank you for everything that you're doing, and it's my honor to be part of the opening discussion this morning. I'll stay on as long as I can, but forgive me when I click off and join the others, but the other commitments I have. But I do look forward to the outcomes of this conference and this symposium today. Thank you, Jim, and back over to you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Llyod. Yeah, and thank you very much for the kind words and for your support of our initiatives here. And all the best to you, and especially to your wife as she goes through her health journey. All the best. Thanks. It's my pleasure now to invite our VP Research, Dr. Malcolm Campbell, to come up to say some introductory remarks. And then as Malcolm's making his way up, as we get the IT switched over, I just want to send a word of thanks out to Malcolm for his support for the Institute. This took a lot of work from a lot of people, and Malcolm was really central and essential in bringing the Institute forward, taking it through the process to ratify it and have support from the university to make it an actual body, and we're grateful for that. So thank you very much, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Jim, and truly a pleasure to be here with all of you this morning, and thank you for the kind remarks, but really all of the success of this particular institute is due to our fantastic researchers here at University of Guelph, and in particular the leadership that's been provided by Professors Oblak and Petrik in terms of moving this particular initiative forward. I think you'd probably, Lloyd's picture would be more accurate for me than that one, as I said, it is wonderful to be here together with you this morning. The Bench to Bedside Translational Health Research Institute is something that is truly resonant here at University of Guelph. As Vice President of Research, obviously I give a lot of thought to what it is that we do in the research to innovation front here at the university. We have a long-standing history, one that extends back to our founding colleges, almost 150 years. In fact, OAC is 150 years old next year. So a very long history of mobilizing knowledge out of the academy and into the world at large. It is embedded within our DNA. It was the raison d'etre of our original colleges, and it's something then that is embedded deeply within our institution today. The Bench to Bedside Institute is certainly a manifestation of that long history and something that brings it to life today in a very real and resonant way. As a board member, a board of directors member of the Ontario Institute of Cancer Research and also of the Ontario Centre for Innovation, I think a lot about how one moves innovation into the health science space. And here again, the Bench to Bedside Institute is something that is beautifully aligned with what it is that we're doing here in the province. We had the Ontario Institute of Cancer Research, OICR, visit here just a little over a month ago, and what we saw was the incredible connections between the initiatives that are being taken there in conducting research that addresses amongst the most vexing health problems that we have, the manifestation and the treatment of cancer. We saw the beautiful connection between what it is that OICR is doing and what it is that we do here at University of Guelph. I've been thinking about the niche that the Bench to Bedside Institute fills, given a very rich ecosystem of activity in the translational health space. And the story that came to mind, and it is an ableist story, and my apologies for that, but the story that came to mind is a story about a gentleman who leaves his house in the middle of the night. He's making his way to his car, and he drops his keys on the ground. He spends the next half an hour looking for his keys, comes into the house, he's despondent. His partner says to him, "What happened? Didn't you find your keys?" And he said, "No, I've been looking for half an hour." And they said to him, well, why didn't you find them? And he said, "Well, I was looking over there." And the partner said, "Well, where were you looking?" He said, "Well, I was looking under the street lamp because that's where the light was," not recognizing, of course, that he might have easily dropped the keys between the house and the car where it's darkened. The truth of that story, or the intent of that story, is meant to be that as humans, we have a tendency to look at where the light is. We have a tendency to look where the low-hanging fruit is and not think about where actually the solutions can be found. The Bench to Bedside Institute doesn't necessarily look where the light is shining, but looks where the solutions are likely to be found. In the translational health space, we've been looking for years at solutions by looking directly at humans or looking at model organisms that are ill-suited for the means of discovering the very innovations that are necessary to address our most vexing health challenges. The Bench to Bedside Institute, by switching the gaze, shining a flashlight, if you will, on companion animals, provides us with a means by which to cast a light where solutions are more likely to be found. I'm minded of a statement made by Auguste Croix, a scientist back in 1925, and then it was reiterated again by Hans Krebs in 1975, that for every and this, by the way, is completely a paraphrase, for every challenge, every scientific challenge that is out there, every challenge that we have in health sciences, for example, there's an organism that is perfectly suited as a model to help us find the solution. And I believe that the work that our group here is doing specifically on companion animals is the route to that particular solution. So I applaud you all for the direction that you've taken. I think Shayan's done a wonderful job today of talking about the assets and the history and importantly, the people that embody that concept here at the university. I applaud you all for the work that you're doing. The one final note that I wanted to focus on is just to say, in my remarks, I have really cast a light on research to innovation, innovation to impact. And the one piece that I missed out along the way is a people piece, and that's the talent that is necessary to create those discoveries that are mobilized into innovations that in turn have impact. And I think as equally important as doing the work are the people that do the work. And again, as I look out here, particularly, and I'm going to call you young people because I'm feeling relatively, I turned 60 in a week's time, so I'm feeling particularly aged right now. But as I look here out at the young people, I'm greatly heartened by the wonderful individuals that are actually involved in conducting this work, to making those discoveries happen, to converting those discoveries to innovations. I applaud you as well because you are the people that are going to lead us to those powerful solutions in the future and really be the game changers that help us realize the ambition of the Translational Health Research Institute here at University of Guelph to make a difference in health research and help us realize our ambition here at University of Guelph to improve life. So on behalf of University of Guelph, I'll conclude my remarks, and for that, everybody should applaud and just say, again, thank you, Michelle, Jim, for your leadership, everyone else involved in this initiative for what it is that you've done, and more importantly, what it is that you're going to do. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Malcolm. I have to say, when you say you're feeling aged, when I see you running to work in a three-piece suit with a backpack on, I don't think you can really claim to be feeling aged. But thanks for those inspirational words. I really appreciate it. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Betsy McGregor, who's coming to us, bringing a really important patient perspective. Dr. McGregor is a member of the Order of Canada. She received that for all the work that she did and leadership she showed in bringing women into the field of STEM, which is extremely commendable. And there's a long list of accolades we could go through for Betsy, but just to hit some of the highlights, she's a very strong patient advocate and has been relentlessly supportive of the Institute's initiatives, and we're very grateful for that. She's an advisor to the board of directors for the Institute, which is a reflection of the level of impact that her participation is having. She's won the Head of Public Service in Canada Award and is the Deputy Director of the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. So has a vast, broad array of expertise and perspectives that we're very fortunate to learn from today. So, Betsy.
Thank you very much, Jim. Bonjour, Anine, and good morning, all. I am so excited to be here this morning. I arrived from Venice last night, and to bring to our thinking today the prism of a patient. I have been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So the uniqueness and the excitement for me in the model of the Bench to Bedside Institute is the prism of the patient being included as a diverse voice and a perspective that will help both in the design, development, and delivery of the B2B Institute's vision. And I'm delighted to join colleagues who are in studies, who are in industry, who are patients, who are colleagues in animal health and human health. And in some degree, this reflects what my work was as a fellow at the Harvard Medical School. I coordinated a global think tank, a 2-year think tank on the ethics of xenotransplantation. And this unique model of combining perspectives really enriched the manner in which we were able to work our way through the creation of public policy, global public policy on transplanting organs between species lines. We had on our global think tank scientists from around the world, animal rights advocates from around the world, researchers, clinicians, surgeons, and this blend of talent, I believe, is a unique nature of the Institute here too, which should be augmented, and I'm really delighted to share with you my personal story. This is a PowerPoint which I assembled during the course of the weeks and months after my diagnosis. It came 3 weeks after receiving news from the Governor General that my work on girls and women and the promotion of youth leadership in science was the Award of Canada, was almost immediately followed by my diagnosis. And so as my treatment unfolded, I put together a kit for those who follow me who might find their tips useful. This is following a life of great activity. I've summited 2 of the 7 summits in the world and walked the Camino of St. James and coached Special Olympic soccer. I'm really physically and mentally really engaged in life and in science and research. But when I was diagnosed, I began a mountain climb of a different kind. And it began with some kind of discomfort in the beginning of January of 2021, which cascaded to the bottom into the diagnosis of the ovarian cancer. And suddenly my life came to a tumultuous halt, and I felt, as most patients likely do, swallowed like Le Petit Prince when painting the picture of an elephant swallowed by a boa. It was what I felt. It was a world consumed by new tests and treatments, by acronyms, even though I was in the field of science and medicine, acronyms and anxiety. And so the next slide was for those who might think about what to do before you begin the chemotherapy. The kinds of things and appointments you might do, the record-keeping tools you might put into place, the equipment you might need post-operatively that you could put into place to help position yourself strongly for the experience ahead. And little did I know that I would lose most of my hearing as an offshoot of this treatment. So I also include a slide to say, get a baseline hearing test so you're able to moderate what the impacts have been. And yes, of course, the usual cutting of hair. This is my sister who accompanied me to the shaving of the head. And here's what it felt like, just a roller coaster. Despite the strong positioning I have in the field, it was an upside down world out of control. And so in my tips, I say give faith a chance in your life and consider those parts of your journey that you can control and those parts of readership or models or mentors that you can lean on and dip into during your journey. And so in February, I began to find my feet in this new world, what the chair meant and what the pit was all about, and how you recovered and began again and then followed back into the pit. And the oak tree was a poem that uplifted me during the course of this, which said, a mighty wind blew night and day, and it stole the oak leaves away. It snapped its boughs and pulled its bark until the oak was tired and stark, but still the oak tree held its ground while the trees fell all around. The weary wind gave up and spoke, how can you still be standing, oak? And the oak tree said, well, I know that you can break every branch of mine in two, and you can carry away every leaf and shake my limbs and make me sway. But I have roots stretched into the earth, growing stronger since my birth. You'll never touch them, for you see, they are the deepest part of me. Until today, I wasn't sure just how much I could endure. But now I found, thanks to you, I'm stronger than I ever knew. And yes, this slide has been so helpful to the many persons who have received this PowerPoint, and Jim and the Institute have it, and it's as widely shared as you wish, that the pit, and we all experience it in different ways, and a tip of how I managed every time I went into chemo to the days that crushed you post chemotherapy treatment. And then in March, I began to outreach into different circles of support as a patient, and that included the hospice circle of women with different ages and types and stages of cancer, a psychologist counselor, so that I had broader than just my family as a support and a counter input into my experience. And activities, I was asked by a multinational company to mentor a senior woman leader in the Ukraine at the war zone front. And this was a wonderful outcome of COVID, that we can work virtually. It was contained, and I could use intentionally the amount of energy that I could expend during the treatment cycle. So I chose with great precision what I wanted to do a deep dive in. And the Institute is a champion in my spirit, and one that I wish, whatever months or years I'm given, to provide the best support I can. And then a slide on, if friends say, and they will, what can I do? Ideas on how to be specific so that your friends can help you. And then in April, post-operatively, came the sea of uncertainty when I did not know my prognosis. I did not know how far the disease had spread. And so the anxiety rose within me to sleep and recover. And there's my new hairdo. I don't have to worry about whether it rains or not anymore. It's quite, you chaps have it quite easy, actually. It's very, the world collapses inwards, and you can only do what your body will enable you to do. And you'll never guess what the Barbie world has out on the market now. That's she. So the world is accommodating that 1 in 2 of us, look around, someone beside you, half this room is either experiencing cancer, is a caregiver, or will in their lifetime be a cancer patient. I love hats, I love scarves, and I never did get used to those skull cap things, so I have my hat and scarf next to Dr. Teresa Bernardo and my colleague from OVC. And the snow gave way in the spring on the 180-day patient journey I took. And exercise was a real force of rebuilding my spirit and my body towards recovery. This sign was helpful and not a bad idea in the world to continue inhaling and exhaling. It's something that you kind of collapse inwards with anxiety. And the bell, which I was not used to, this theory that when you finish, the bell rings. At the hospital of my treatment, they didn't have a bell, so when I arrived back at the Kawartha Lake, Stony Lake, Clear Lake, where I live, my friends collected with COVID masks on and ringing bells to welcome me back to the lake. But the surprising spin-offs of the experience included those of us who are type A's and are the ever-ready bunny. Are you now in a world of hanging upside down and just hanging in? And so I wanted to finish this personal slideshow by saying, take someone with you at the exit interview, because we're inclined to hear what we would like to hear and perhaps oversee some of the details of what you need to hear in your forward care, nor did I expect a fork in the road. Would I continue therapy, or would I choose to go without and simply take tests every 6 months? And my test is next week for my first 6-month period. Yes, I got COVID in September, so I advise to continue with the COVID and the fall flu shot. And included in the toolbox is the PET scan. And finally, I concluded with a slide for children, because we have our parents, we have our children, and in my case, 2 grandchildren, 4 and 7 years old. And these words are big, and there's confusion, and my hair has totally changed color and length. So I conclude with some storybooks and links for your family. But then a strange thing happened. The University of Guelph contacted me to say, you've been chosen as the alumnus of honor of 2022. I Googled the award and found that it was conceived in 1970, and only 15 women had won the award, including Dr. Roberta Bondar, a colleague and friend. I was thrilled, but it provoked me to come full circle from OVC 87, my grad year, and to say, what is going on? And here my world collided with the world of the Institute. And it was on slide earlier with Dr. Sharif, the exciting position of the animal and human health and environmental health combined under the umbrella of the Sustainable Development Goals and the One Health concept. And I felt very at home from the Harvard Medical School global think tank that it's a strong concept. It's a worthy, diverse spectrum of involvement, all stages of the Institute, including the diverse voices. And so I conclude with a challenge to each person in this room. The role that I and my colleague, Honorable Deb Schultz, former Member of Parliament, who is on this afternoon's panel and with us here, not only did we meet and speak with the Institute leaders here, and including Dr. Charlotte Yates, your president, but also we organized a meeting with Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdeswell to raise the profile and the excitement about the potential for youth leadership and for innovation creation. And as Dr. Campbell was saying, from innovation to impact, to meet also with MPs, and on the bottom slide, Dr. Marvin Tile of Sunnybrook Hospital, and on the far right, Senator Andrew Cardozo, and LeBlanc, MP, Honorable LeBlanc, who was a stem cell recipient from a donor in Germany. And he introduced the donor in the gallery of the House of Commons because over 80% of stem cell donors come from Germany. So this consciousness of raising of how involved are Canadians, how excited can we involve Canadians, is an important role. In the bottom right-hand side, I received an award at the National Convention for the inaugural award for engaging women to take a place at the decision table based on my book of 95 women introduced by the Honorable Kim Campbell. 95 women who have made their way municipally, provincially, federally, and in First Nation governance to be a voice at that decision table. And last week in Florence, I met with the Right Honorable Kim Campbell, who got her full dose of excitement about the B2B Institute and is looking forward to a Zoom briefing into the future. I also did a media story. In my case, it's not a companion dog or cat, it's a cow. So I have a sudden huge affection for dairy cattle. Wherever they are on the roadside, I salute them. They may one day save my life. And this is a stem cell story by Professor Emeritus Carolyn Kay, who was, like the Honorable Dominique LeBlanc, a recipient of a stem cell transplant. So here's my closing challenge to each one of you, whatever stage you are in your career. Can you think about in your presentations today, in this afternoon's panel, or as you go forward in your studies, of cops and robbers, the cops. First of all, collaborators. Are there key collaborators locally, nationally in Canada, or internationally that you think would enhance your work or the success of the Institute? And obstacles. What obstacles do you see or you experiencing as an undergraduate, PhD student, or a leader of a college or a university? What are the obstacles so that those of us who are your allies can mobilize those networks that we know and bring them in behind us as allies? And finally, policy. We just heard from MP Longfield. What policymakers, what policy gaps do you see with the granting agencies that is inhibiting or could, if removed, facilitate your success? And finally, the solutions so that we can follow track in the footsteps of your ideas in your presentations today. So I want to say miigwech. Thank you, merci beaucoup. It is a grand pleasure to be on your advisors to the Institute, and I look forward to every step of the way. And thank you for including that very important voice of the patient prism in the development, design, and delivery of the Institute's vision. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Betsy. You never fail to bring a really inspirational perspective, so thank you very much for that. Just like to continue on with the final speaker is going to bring introductory remarks, Dr. Howard Dobson. Howard has been a really important ally of the Institute and has brought tremendous industry connections and really has been educational for us on how to navigate some of the nuances of bringing in diverse partnership to the Institute. Howard has vast expertise in diagnostic imaging as professor emeritus here at the Institute and is board certified veterinary radiologist, but beyond that, really has important industry expertise that has been invaluable to us so far, and I know will continue to be so. Howard.
Thank you. I'm going to modify my presentation a little bit because there's a little bit of duplication in some of my slides. So I'm going to go over the slides fairly quickly, but I'm going to wind it up with a couple of anecdotes about what I've done in raising the profile of the Institute in terms of industry, which is where my connections are. So I'm going to quickly go through the slides and then talk a bit more about how we might move this forward. So the question I was posed, why are companion animals important? The trite answer is companion animals fill the translational gap. But that poses the question, what is the translational gap and what are we talking about? And we've already heard this, that 80% of human clinical trials fail, largely because the initial research is done in rodents. Rodents aren't little people. And when you go to, oh, yes. Thank you, Shayan. When you go to a clinical trial, it's incredibly expensive. I took those numbers that you see there off the internet, and I'm sure you could find a whole variety of different numbers. It's multiple billions of dollars. So when a pharmaceutical company comes along, they want to be really sure that it's a low risk investment in order to get the outcome that they want, which is getting a product licensed for the market. This slide is a summary of what Shayan presented in a much better way than I have on this slide. The comparison between the genetics of rodents, companion animals, and humans is really interesting. There's relatively low genetic homology between rodents and humans, whereas dogs and cats are much closer. We tried doing research with immunocompromised animals, humanized rodents, and they really haven't brought us very much further forward. There's certainly been some successes, but it's not been a huge leap. The research animals are typically housed, and I've put it in inverted commas, a sterile environment. The animals tend to be inbred, so there's minimal genetic diversity. We are obliged to keep these animals under very clean, well-fed conditions. Compare that to our companion animals. Sometimes they eat the same food as us. There's a lot of genetic diversity. There are different breeds, whereas a lot of the rodents are inbred, so it's a very narrow genetic background. In the human side, we've got different races. So there's a lot of comparison between dog breeds and the vast complexity of humans. We live in the same environment. We know a lot about environment and influences on disease, but there's a huge amount, the unknown unknowns that we don't know about. So by being in the same environment, we're in a much better position to move forward with translational research done in companion animals. So this is a method for industry to de-risk the process of a clinical trial by doing an initial clinical trial in companion animals and get a sense of, does the treatment work? And you can do that relatively inexpensively. And I've got up there, the response from industry has been very positive. And this is where I'm going to segue into my anecdotes. I'm semi-retired. I work part-time for a company called Invicro, which is the largest global imaging-only contract research organization that does human drug development. So Invicro does research starting with cell culture through rodents, translational research, and right through into late phase clinical trials in humans. So I have a lot of interaction with pharma companies who are interested in moving forward. And completely lost the thought of what I was going to say, which is what happens when you don't have prepared for this. So I hear a lot from industry, you know, why are things not working? So my two anecdotes are, the company that I work for was founded by a guy called Jack Hoppen, started off with 4 founders, and within 8 years, it was a 500-person company. So he's an incredibly successful entrepreneur. And he knew that I was now semi-retired. I'm still working for Invicro part-time because it's really exciting work. So he called me up because he knew I was doing some consulting and he wanted me to do some work for the new company which he has founded and is so far being incredibly successful. We hadn't spoken in a couple of years, so he's a very personable guy, which, you know, successful entrepreneurs usually are. And he asked me what I was doing. So I told him what I was doing. I said, yeah, I'm working with the University of Guelph on this Bench to Bedside Translational Institute, and I explained what it was, and he completely forgot about what he really wanted me to do. He wanted to talk more about what the Institute was all about. And as a result of that conversation, we've done a small project with them involving the tumor bank, which has been successful. We've been in talks about a potential dog study with cancer. So there really is enthusiasm. And in my day-to-day work with Invicro, I talk in terms of business development with sponsors who are interested in doing this research. And aside from my life in Invicro involvement with OVC, I've got fingers in other pies as a consultant. So I've got a network of connections, and at every opportunity, I bring up the Bench to Bedside Translational Institute. And the response has been incredibly positive. Oh, this is really great. Tell us more. And we'll keep that in mind because we know we'll be doing a clinical trial in the future based on the preclinical research we're doing now. So I think there's been a tremendously positive response from industry, and I think that bodes well for the success of the Institute as we go forward. So thank you for bearing with me in my anecdotes, and I will be back again this afternoon to moderate the panel. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks so much, Howard. Greatly appreciate your perspective and also championing the Institute at all those opportunities. That's terrific.